Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, again, we spoke about this last week. It's spooky season. We're going to be looking at all aspects of the paranormal tonight, including maybe a bit of witchcraft. So it should be a great show. It should be interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's always befitting for October, isn't it? Really, no
Yeah.
matter where you are in the world. But you know what? It's something that stretches across the whole year. Of course, when you talk about true phenomenon, witchcraft, and that sort of thing. You know what? You are right. It does seem to get illuminated around this time of the year. But it's a shame, really, because I mean, I don't think it should just come out the woodwork on an October night. Because I find it fascinating all year long. And witchcraft is transcendently so old and goes back many, many years. And it's got its footprint in many different ritualistic practices which have been utilized all over the world and even in current times. And sometimes things that we don't even get to hear about. But it all fascinating
Yeah,
nonetheless.
absolutely. Yeah, well, we'll come back to Halloween and some of that stuff in a while. But I mean, our guest this evening is a paranormal researcher, investigator, lecturer, podcast host, and the co-founder of Sinister Sisters Paranormal Investigations, Rachel Krebs-TRISILLA. Rachel, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to this. So, Rachel, it's a quite mundane question, so I apologise for that. But I think it's the best place to start because for all the similarities, there's always unique aspects to how everyone answers this. So, basically, what dragged you into the paranormal world? What was the catalyst that made you want to go from enthusiast, say, to really digging deeper and researching this kind of stuff?
Well, I think the roots go back to when I was actually a child. I was probably about maybe 10, 11 years old. And it was after my grandfather passed away. I was staying at um, his and my grandmother's house. And I came out one morning, as I normally did, after waking up in the living room, to have breakfast with my grandmother. And I walked out in that living room and I saw like the apparition of my grandfather just standing there in the living room, kind of looking out the curtains. And, I was like, stunned because I had never experienced that, that I can like recollect that strongly before. And so I ran to my grandmother and I was like, Grandma, there's somebody standing in the living room. And she goes out there and she goes, It's okay. It's just Grandpa. He comes to visit me a lot. And then she's talked to him and she said, Grandpa, it's time to go. You're scaring your granddaughter. And so then he just kind of like, the only word I can describe of it is maybe dissipated. He kind of like faded out and he just wasn't there anymore. And so that really got like my mind turning, I think, at that young age because of that experience. And then I think it just carried forward throughout my life. I think it just made me want to know more and more why I experienced that. And, if I was in fact like one of the only ones who experienced that, or is it something common? And I think that I then had another experience when I was a teenager as well, really being touched by a spirit. And that's who shook me a bit, but again, it just piqued that curiosity more and more. And I don't think I ever lost it, but that's when I was living in California. And in 2019, I moved to Nashville area in Tennessee. And that's where I got involved with a all female paranormal team.
Yeah.
And that really got me into the investigating portion of it. And I was with them for a few years before I ended up co-founding my own team with my best friend. So yeah, that kind of hopefully that answered the question in
Yeah.
Really, it does.
broad.
I do have a couple of questions though, Rachel. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I've got three principal questions here. How old were you when you first saw your grandfather?
I, I was
Was you
about
young?
I was about 10 years old or so.
Okay, so about 10 years old. And did you see him as a solid figure as he is a person, or was he translucent, transparent, smoky, or
Yeah, to me, he appeared sort of translucent. I think that he was, it's very hard to describe, kind of maybe opaque.
Right. Okay.
And
And how long was it after his passing when he was being seen? I mean, was he much when you saw him? Was like 10 years of age. Had he passed recently, or had it been some time?
yeah, he had passed probably within, I would say, maybe the 6 months or less.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's I hear that a lot. I hear that I mean, I've even questioned to the point that is there a transitional time? You know, that we do see loved ones and relatives for a duration of time, and then something changes because why, people have thought, well, why don't I always continue to have that experience seeing these loved ones? Because you'd think the loved ones would want to engage and, with the loved ones they've left behind. But sometimes it does seem to be sort of a kind of a cut-off point, and I tend to find it usually between 2 and 6 or 7 months. It's like a small gap, and then afterwards seems there might be other things, but not so much. Seeing an apparition as much. Have you heard about that yourself, Rachel? Do you think that there is some type of cut-off event, cut-off time?
I think so. I think that as I've shared my experiences with other people, they seem to have something similar when they have that interaction with a loved one or some sort of relative. I think that they see it relatively short time after their passing that they seem to come to them. And in fact, I had posted something. Oh no, it was like we're doing this our team is leading this tour is sort of part of investigation at a historic building here in Tennessee. And we had done like a sort of like interview, answered questions to be able to post to social media. And, I shared my experience of, seeing my grandfather. And then my sister commented on it. And she said in the same house, she had the experience of seeing my aunt or our aunt that passed away, shortly after she had passed as well from cancer at a relatively young age. And so I didn't know she had that experience there. It was kind of until I opened up about mine that she said, that's so weird because I had an experience not seeing grandpa, but seeing our aunt. And I was just like, wow, okay. I didn't know that either, but it seemed to be at my grandmother's house. So I don't know. It was very interesting how that came. And then when I was talking to my parents about it, because I kind of shared that with them recently, and my dad's like, because I said, I don't know if I ever told you. And he was like, you did. You did, in fact, tell me when it happened to you when you were about around that age of 10. And he said also grandma, which is his mother, told him that she was often seeing people and she would claim that they were coming in and out of her closet door.
Closet doors.
It's
Well, what?
interesting you say that, Rachel. Can I just
Yeah.
ask you on that? Because we spoke to a guy who a few months ago whose property was haunted, for want of a better phrase or word. And the investigations basically concluded, or determined at least, that the property, there was a portal within the property or a gateway or something like that. So do you find that the fact that there's so much activity in your grandma's house, do you think that might have something to do with it, where there's other spirits that are, accessing this world through that portal or gateway?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the space or the people, because I think that, well, I definitely know, since I started investigating more and more that I do have like this empathic, and I'm learning that I'm a little more clairaudient and that I hear spirits a lot, and so I think that has intensified since I've been investigating. So I think that my family, if my grandmother was seeing these spirits coming out in and out of her closet door, and in fact, my dad said that she tried to tell the guy that she had been dating after my grandfather, that she tried to tell him that was happening, that was her experience, and he was like, kind of like, you're crazy, that's not happening, there's no way. But my dad said she was very adamant that she was seeing these spirits coming in and out of her closet door. So I don't know if it's the space or the person or the combination, but it's definitely interesting, and I think deserves to be like, connect the dots there, the connective tissue somewhere along those lines.
It's always interesting when there's focal points in buildings, because a lot of the time you're going to find sort of closets and cupboards and things like that. And I always think to myself, why? I mean, you could manifest what I would refer to as maybe a micro electron diffusion region for phenomena just coming in and out. When it wants to, when it chooses to, there's a certain key location, usually in a building or on the ground of where the building is. But you know what? When I talk to people, and I do not know why, what the interest is with closets, but they seem to be quite high ranking in regarding the point of origin. It's interesting. Don't know
Yeah.
why.
Does the closet become a portal?
Yeah, it
It
seems
is
like the
interesting in a
chosen.
way. I mean, because some researchers will suggest that that's because former time. I know this doesn't work across the board, but in a former time, that closet wasn't there and it was something else, etc.
Mm.
I do think it's interesting as well. I know we're just drifting off on a quick tandem here, but things like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for example, that was literally like a portal.
Ah,
So again, I know
yeah.
that's a story, but there's certain truths, etc., etc. Can I just pick up on something, Rachel? That you mentioned there that the more you've experienced, you kind of you kind of hear spirits a little bit more, and you're kind of more aware of your own abilities, I guess. Do you think that's something that you know that's intensified because of the more you've experienced? Or have you made an active decision to learn this, or is it a combination of the two? I mean, I find that interesting.
Yeah, I think that I think that I knew I was sensitive as a child. Um, I think there was a certain point in time, unfortunately, when I was with my ex-husband, that he kind of made it seem like it wasn't a good thing to be sensitive. And then so I think I shut it down for a long time. Um, and it wasn't until I started really actively investigating and I guess opening myself up to it again. So I think there's a certain, like, yes, you're born with it, but I think there's a certain of like tuning into that particular frequency. And the more that you practice it, I think that the more it becomes easier to do.
Yeah.
And I think that I
Yeah.
started out like being able to really feel the energies. So I knew that there was like that empath qualities to where I could walk into a location and I could just be like, okay, it feels either, I get like feel it in my body somewhere, like heavy on my chest or, pressure in my head or just something like in the pit of my stomach. If there was something like if I walked into a particular location, I got to a certain point in the hallway of this home. And I was just like, oh, okay, something happened right here. I don't know what it is yet, but something
Mm.
happened right here. And actually my best friend and, partner in the team, she had, cause I had this look on my face and she was like, you're feeling something, right? And I was like, yep, right here. Something happened. And so then we asked the person who was kind of going to give us a tour of the house, if something happened in this particular location. And he was like, yep. He was like, you want me to tell you about it now, or you want me to tell you about it towards the end of the tour? And I was like, let's just wait till the end of the tour because I wanted to just see if I could tease it out. But in
Mm.
fact, in that particular spot, there was a little girl who actually caught on fire right there. And there was, in fact, he showed us at the end of the tour that which we couldn't see because the door was sort of blocking it, but along like the door frame, you could still see the burnt wood there that had where she
Wow.
caught on fire. So she didn't pass in that spot, but she passed a couple of days later in the house. And she's one of the known apparitions to be seen in and around that home.
Mm.
So it was like I felt it right there. It's just like woo,
Yeah,
and there were many locations before I even started investigating because we would always go, like my husband and I, my current husband, we would go and go to time we take a vacation somewhere. I'd always try to go to like a haunted city, try to get into the ghost tours or even into like public investigations. And, I had experiences in almost all those locations at some point in time, but it was definitely an impact. But as I've gotten into really investigating with my team and opening up, that's when I'm getting kind of the clairaudient part of it as well. So the clairsentient and clairaudient
Yeah.
ability. So,
Do you do you find, Rachel, that when you're picking up these energies, are they always negative? Things that bad things that happened, or do you pick up on positive energies as well, such as a specific location where you can say, well, this location is things nice happened here, that sort of thing.
yeah, I think in I pick up both, I think the positive and the negative. Um, like for example, in the historic home where I actually was last night, that we actually have investigated a number of times. One of our team members, she's the executive director of that home. And it's definitely, it was a generational home. It was built by this family who owned it for
Mm.
6 generations. It was a plantation back in the day. And the family ended up donating it to the city. And the city has now like you got like a foundation and there's a board of directors that upkeep the home. But there still is one of the family members who's the curator of what now is the museum of the home. And every time we've investigated and what we feel there is the family is there. They've actually come through on EVPs. I've heard them before there, and it does feel very much like a family home. Like I walk into the space and I do feel like, I understand the family, that this is the children are still there. Like I've heard them run around the property. I felt like it was a prominent judge. He was the family head and the one who built the house. He was a prominent judge in the city as well. So I really feel their energies are there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Is that like the stone tape theory, Rachel? Do you feel? Is it just residual, or is there any type of interaction?
oh, there's definitely interaction, but I do feel like some of it is residual. Like
Right.
I do because I think that some of like when we're hearing footsteps or sometimes it's doors opening, closing, those kind of things, I think maybe residual. But we've definitely had responses that have come through that we've gotten on recording. Like we had a full sense we were in the judge's office, which, was a place that typically, at that time period, women weren't really allowed in there in that kind of space. That was the judge's office and his like parlor where he would go and like, smoke a cigar and he'd take, his whiskey and meet with, attorneys and that kind of thing in his space. And so we've got like, the whole team in there. And one of the sentences we caught was because we were, asking all sorts of questions and asking them to, of course, do things. Can you light up this equipment? Can you move this object? Can you, all those kind of things. And he just said, clear as day on EVP, he said, the children want quiet. And we were like, wow, that was, because we were definitely trying to investigate in that space. And and it was like, I think it was, roughly close to midnight. And so he was like, enough. Like the children
Yeah.
want quiet, like they're trying to sleep. So it got us really thinking like about like are they just on another timeline
Yeah,
Mm.
or
exactly what
another
I'm thinking.
space parallel to ours that you know do they see us? It's very much, I don't know if you guys have seen, but we talk about it a lot, the movie The Others.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
And it very much feels like in that movie, the
mm,
mother did not know she was dead, right? She thought she was being haunted. And then the people investigating the house, the psychic that came there, the medium, whatever, they were experiencing picking up on her. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like, well, is that what we're experiencing? And
Yeah.
so we often ask these questions all the time, trying to get to be like, can you see us? What year is it to you guys? We'll ask those kind of questions, and they're kind of like, a lot of times they will say yes, they can see us. It's like hard to get the time period, and so then it has this asking the other question which is like, do they see us as the ghosts? Are we the ones,
Exactly. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
are we really dead? Like, are they dead? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
what it really calls into question, like, what does living mean?
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I was reading something the other day. It was similar to what you're saying, and the guy was saying essentially our ghosts, as we understand them, just in not NHI, but other humans in other dimensions, whether that's other existences or other times. And as you were saying there, that suggests if he's saying, it's quiet, the children want quiet, that suggests that they're existing on their own timeline, concurrent to ours. So yeah, it is really interesting, that kind of thing. I mean, have you experienced anything else along those type of lines, Rachel? Where you're hinting at other dimensions or other realms of existence?
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of those places that we've investigated, we do get a lot of interaction where it seems like they're just coexisting in a space that, they can perceive us, we can perceive them. I don't know exactly, the how yet, right? Because that's really what we would like to get to the bottom of. But like, for example, we went to Brushy Mountain, which is a state penitentiary.
Right.
That is no longer in use, but it was a state penitentiary in Tennessee. It's very known for the hauntings there. And we've had like interaction from what seems to be prison guards that used to be there. And it does seem like they're just going about doing their jobs. Like they're still in this, like in this plane of existence that's just beyond maybe what we call like beyond the veil.
Yeah.
That time, that, I don't know, slip of time maybe, that that our energy does live on and just exists in a form that we can't always perceive. But in these certain places, like, there's just something special about it. And, I often talk about when I go and speak at these different paranormal conferences, one of the things I talk about, which you touched on a bit, is stone tape theory, place memory, stigma theory. And those are some of the things that we look at, right? Whether it's not just the building may have something to do with it, but it's the land as well that might be either amplifying these energies or recording these energies or just harnessing. Could it be that the limestone? Because in Tennessee, Kentucky, kind of that southern region, we have a lot of limestone, and a lot of the foundations of these buildings are limestone. So is limestone, somehow, holding in, retaining these energy or amplifying this energy? The same thing with like quartz, a lot of the time granite. So it's interesting. And then also the proximity to water. And it seems to be this like trifecta of those things in these particular locations.
Absolutely, Steve. I mean, we've touched on this kind of thing before, haven't we? The water, the rock, all this kind of stuff.
Well,
It's kind of coming together, really.
yeah, I mean, there does seem to be in some cases a lot of evidence to support geophysical connection to locations. And it's as if sometimes trauma can bleed into the environment, and that can become residual experiences, which really, when it comes to that sort of a thing, I wouldn't actually think it was, when it comes to residual phenomena, a haunting. I mean, hauntings just covers too much. I mean, I see hauntology as interaction, intelligence, that sort of thing, where maybe we've just got the wrong name for that because it is easily misidentified, residual stuff. But if it is a recorded event that's played back, then we were looking at maybe some type of natural earthly phenomena that seems to have the capabilities of recording. Now they don't seem to record every event, which is very interesting. It seems to record heightened emotion, and it's not always negative. It's not always on the battlefield or when someone's passed away or whatever. Sometimes it could be an old inn where you hear people enjoying themselves, and you can hear them all laughing and that, and you walk in and there's nothing there, so, but it does seem to be what I would refer to as heightened emotion gets caught somehow into that environment, and somehow there's a mechanism for being able to record that heightened emotion and be played back. And it's always been problematic, in parapsychological circles dealing with this sort of thing, because it's the ultimate question, isn't it? About where do spirits lie? The evidence that we have in modern day science would suggest that human consciousness is created in the brain. So therefore, reality, like what we perceive, is all through the brain and the consciousness and of creating that reality for us. It is pliable, but through the experiments carried out, and I'm not just talking about dual slit experiment, I'm talking about triple slit, 4 slit, 5 slit, 100 slit. It shows evidence that we may be living in a multiple reality environment. So when we do pass, consciousness might be able to pierce through. The body wouldn't. I think the physical body goes to this environment, this reality, but consciousness might be able to pierce those veils of others into another reality, and you might be consciously aware that you're back into the same environment that you grew up in or you lived in, and other people around you, and you kind of live a cycle. But there's some bleed through, and I don't think it happens all the time. I mean, I don't know of a haunted location that's haunted 24/7.
No.
I've never found one, and I'm sure Rachel agree with that. But it is on occasion, and it is this bleed between the two realities merge. Experience happens, and then I think realities go like this, like a waveform, and I think that there are multiple of them. Because, we can't just stick it to say, oh, it's all about the land, because we'd have to say, well, what about when it hauntings at sea? What about, phantom apparitions that are being seen on an aircraft? The ghost of Flight 401, which is very well known, and you think to yourself, okay, a little bit more to it than that, but definitely there is something to do with the land, but it's not written in stone. This is the problem. And it's so difficult to investigate. All we can do is theorize at this moment in time as to what that all represents. But I think it's a very strong theory that, we're dealing with multiple realities which systematically are taking place, and we have these crossover points. And they're aware of us as we're aware of them on occasion, and interact. I think that's the only feasible explanation I could sort of give, to be honest with you.
It's funny, you drift into consciousness, and so I'm going to just go off on one a little bit here, and then Rachel, I'm going to come back to you, because I think consciousness is going to be important in all of this. But it's Halloween, as we mentioned, and I know that the paranormal world, we spoke about this, Rachel, in communication before we started, this chat. For people like us, that's all year round. But Halloween, in legend, they would say that that's the end of the summer into the winter, and the veil, thins. Is what they say between the living and the dead. Now, obviously, that's legend and myth, but when you bear consciousness in mind, and we were speaking to Anthony Peake about this a few weeks ago, and he was saying, how consciousness essentially might not necessarily be internal; it could be an external force. And what we were speaking about specifically, and what's relevant to what I'm going to say here, is the power of the subconscious mind in manifesting things, whether it's UFOs, whether it's ghosts in this case, or spirits. So, going back to the definition of Halloween, just for the sake of argument here, and because we are on Halloween, do you think the fact that more and more people are a bit more alert to stuff, they're thinking of ghouls and ghosts because of the festivities, do you think subconsciously that could result in that more people witnessing things, more people seeing things, the fact that they're just subconsciously manifesting this stuff? And does that maybe, and again, I'm thinking on the fly here, but is that maybe where some of the origins of the thinning of the veil come from? Because, researchers will say that although there's not more reports of a Halloween, more people are more in tune to such things. So What are your thoughts on that, Rachel? And overall, how important do you think consciousness is, subconsciousness as well as consciousness?
Yeah, well, I think as far as Halloween and thinning of the veil, I think like you touched upon it when you said that maybe people tune in a little bit more there. And maybe because we're headed into a darker period of time, I think that that might have something to do with it. I think that a lot of people like to really they focus around like scary movies and so it's very much like on their mind. And so I think they're like maybe connecting with that frequency and that's why maybe they're experiencing a little bit more. Um, that's my personal opinion, but because that's what all we talk about, like for as far as being paranormal investigators, like spooky season is really like
Mm.
what we live for, that thinning the veil and seeing
Yeah.
if we get more interaction then. But I do think, like on the other flip side to it, that I think getting down to the root of like consciousness and subconsciousness and really what that is would be like
Yeah.
key. I think might be sort of the key to unlocking some of this.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree, Rachel. I think consciousness is a big thing because if you instance, if we have Halloween in Australia, for an example, they have it before us. So the thinning of the veil is moving around the earth like Santa Claus in 24
Mm,
hours because
mm.
of the time differences in all these different countries that might celebrate Halloween. The thinning of the veil is moving around
Which
the
shows
earth
that it's to do with
as it
human
is.
consciousness, basically. You know what I
It's
mean?
definitely
Yeah.
got to be something about human consciousness that connects us to these events. It has always, in traditional terms, it goes back a long time. Get away from the old mechanism of what Halloween represents now compared to what it used to be in its traditional rate. I mean, I spent a couple of years ago Halloween in Ireland where
Mhm.
they literally celebrate it for a full week, and I tell you what, I was absolutely blown away. I mean, that's a full week is like, and it is very surreal, really is, how they celebrate that, and it's totally different. I mean, in the UK, it's one night.
Mm.
Of course, we have a clock change in the UK for 1 hour. So, and that's the October the 21st, just 10 days prior to Halloween. But like I say, it does seem to be something to do with the consciousness about the individuals that may be aware of the thinning of the veil. People are more attuned, just like Rachel said, are aware of it.
Mm. I think one thing that you mentioned there, Rachel, about going into darker days, and obviously there's less daylight, essentially, certainly in our part of the world anyway. And again, a lot of paranormal researchers will say that a lot of this stuff requires the dark to actually manifest. Again, not to keep going back to Anthony Peake, but I'm obsessed with the guy. I mean, I read everything that he's done because he's fantastic. But he was talking about this in one of his books, that where there's ultraviolet light and stuff, and the dark is important. So again, as we drift into these, and I know this is a bit of a reach and a speculative reach at that, but it does make you think whether the fact that we are going into darker days, quite literally, does that assist in the paranormal? I know things happen in the summer. I'm not saying that, but it is something that's quite an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think we've kind of like talked about that at one point when we were investigating a location, because we know that with Rosemont, which is the historic location that our teammate sort of is the executive director of, and she experiences there because she's there every day for work. She experiences phenomena that happens during the day as well as at night. But it seems like there is like an increase of activity that happens at night. And I don't know if that's because, we as, physical beings here, we start to go to sleep. And I think everything kind of quiets down. And, so then there's not as much of us, our physical energy as there is during the day than at night. And that might, they may feel somehow, safer to move about. I don't know. But it's an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do agree that. I mean, when you talk about, I mean, no apparitions that are seen during the day, but tend to be more at night. But then is that because people are investigating more at night? The environment's different at night as well. We are more tuned to external sounds and not so much during the day because it's a very noisy place, isn't it, day?
Mm-hmm.
But anybody that's spent enough time in this subject of the paranormal, and I think Rachel's going to pick up on this, is that night does physically feel different than the day. There's a different feel tonight, and that is intrinsic. It goes back millennia in regarding supernatural paranormal phenomena that they govern the night, and of course days is kind of for us. But I mean, when you talk about UV, I mean photons which are traveling probably 600 million miles an hour, did he act differently in the apparitional stage of during the night. I mean, you are right. Most paranormal apparitions are seen during night, but then most investigations are done at night. I do believe apparitions are seen during the day, but they might be missed so much. And are they clearly as defined because of the amount of photons through UV which are seen during the day? Might not be. But we do get some evidence of glimpses of it that they are around, but they're just kind of more recognizable at night. And that could be simply because of the investigations and the environment and just how our eyes work with photons, I suppose.
Yeah, it could be. I think what you mentioned there, Rachel, as well, about the fact that, going in and out of sleep opens people up to paranormal experiences. I can't remember the word. Is it hypnos? I can't remember the word. I'll flash it up on the screen. But essentially, where you hear voices, it's possibly when you're drifting into sleep and you hear them when you're coming out of sleep. So I think that's interesting. I like the idea of we're not actually using the energy because these things, whatever they are, whether they're part of our subconscious or whether they are independent of us, uh, they need energy to manifest. So if we're not using that energy, then that is another reason why they could. And I've got a friend, I mention him a lot, who keeps statistics on this kind of stuff, and he's hell bent on the fact that most paranormal activity will happen between midnight and 6, with a particular spike between
Yeah.
3 and 6. So there's got to be something behind that. So I mean,
Yeah,
have you come
three
across
o'clock.
that in your research and your investigation? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely see between that time period of, like you said, midnight and 3 a.m. is
Mm.
probably the most
Yeah.
active
There's
time.
actually something called the 3 a.m. phenomena, isn't
Yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah.
Which is just so profound because it stretches across nearly every country. The three, some people thought, oh, it's supernatural orientated because it's a mockery of the Trinity of Christ, and therefore it's three. So everything's got to be demonic, but it isn't, But the 3 o'clock anomaly, yeah, people wake up for 3 o'clock to have experiences.
Mm.
What's all that about? It's very profound, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Rachel, during the course of investigations, have you seen any other connections to other fields of interest that maybe you wouldn't think would be connected to hauntings, whether it be Bigfoot, cryptids, or UFOs? And if you have, could you tell us a bit about that? Because we're of the opinion that somehow these things are all connected right across the spectrum. So, what are your thoughts on that? If it's the kind.
Yeah, I think I've explored that too on different podcasts that, because I'll be on others where they might be more into cryptids or more into UFOs, and there's often where we talk about, is there a connection between the three? And I can say that I believe so. But for example, in this one location that's called Octagon Hall, it's in Franklin, Kentucky. It is known, like widely known, to be where they think a portal exists. And in fact, I took a picture because they say it exists in the middle of this field. I took a picture. I was taking it. It was one of many pictures, but when I took the picture, I didn't see anything. It came later, and it's digital because it was on my phone, right? And I had taken like a series, like a burst series of them. In one picture, there's this column of light that just runs through the middle of the field. And so what's known to the phenomena on that property is not just reports of, apparitions and shadow figures and all kind of the classic, ghostly phenomenon, but there has also been seen on the land, Sasquatch, other cryptids. Like, what's what's been reported a lot lately on that land is the rake.
Oh yes. Mm.
You know, they've seen him multiple times in between. There's a couple of barns on the property, and they've seen him go in between one barn to the other. Um,
Mm.
and so that also there was known as the ghost train. There's like a phantom train now. There used to be, I think the train tracks are still there. They're just not used as much, but they will get like people have been on the deck of the property and they're hearing a train and they're seeing this apparition of this ghostly train just stroll by. So, I mean, that land is also scarred by the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So on that property, the building itself, Octagon Hall, was built by a Confederate sympathizer. He was also a Mason. So he built he built he built Octagon Hall is in the shape of an octagon.
Yeah.
And, you know, has a lot of Masonic like principles, I guess, built into the building. You can in fact see up by one of the windows at the top of the stairs landing, there's the Masonic symbol that's in stained glass up there. So there's a lot of nods, but they were saying it's almost like the perfect shape to trap.
Oh yeah, it is. An octagon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The perfect shape to trap those entities in that space.
Yeah, they reflect
and so
the angles. Yeah.
I've caught on thermal there. I caught out in the field on I've got like a heat signature and there of a person, but it didn't have legs that went all the way to the ground. Is the perfect shape. And I caught him on multiple different images, but on each image, the legs are like a little longer, and then the next image, which is just one right after the other, right? They're shorter. And so he's kind of like phasing in or out. And then we went out there and tried to debunk to see if there was anyone out there and what a person looked like on the thermal compared to this thing. And you can tell that a physical person, their legs are going all the way to the ground. Yeah. So that was one that I caught out in the field, but inside the house, I caught also on thermal this enormously tall shadow figure that was the height of the door. It went all the way up to the door jamb, and I've got it up both on video and on still photographs on the thermal, and you can see it constantly changing, sort of, I would say, morphing almost, with different intensities of hot and cold. Like you could see it like it would start out as very cold. It would be like a deep blue, and then it would change and get a little warmer, and then it would get a little colder, and then it get a little, so it was really interesting. So that's just a number. I mean, that whole property itself, and it's really close to, I forget which parallel it is, but I think it's the
37th or something. 37th.
Oh, yeah, I want to say it's the 37th parallel.
Right. Yeah, the 37th, is it? Right.
Yeah, it runs
So it's right along that line, that 37th parallel. And so they've also seen, just strange lights in the sky over that property as well. So it's kind of like, what is going on here? And the only thing that kind of makes sense to that is perhaps that the portal does exist, where there's, creatures and different, light phenomenon, whether that's
I mean, it's certainly an area of high strangeness, Steve, and we've spoken about this before. There's different theories, but I mean, it does make sense that a gateway exists there, and it's allowing all these different phenomena to kind of enter our world. So, I mean, this sounds like another area of high strangeness.
It does, and it's how I mean, if you want to categorize high strangeness, you should have cryptid, UFO, paranormal. Those three things in a location for, say, 5 square miles, all happening in the location, that'd be classed as high strangeness. But then, if you got something which is a Masonic building, especially it's built as an octagon, which if you look down on the shape of an octagon, it's very traditionalistic of Masonic symbolism, and utilized as bouncing energies backwards and forwards. So maybe when you talk about bouncing energies back and forward, that's why it maybe becomes some type of like Rachel said, you have this trap. Maybe it's because it's reflected energies off the bouncing backwards and forwards. It's been utilized actually, designed for many places all over the world,
Mhm.
for healing, for ritualistic practices. And it is Masonic. Absolutely is. And of course, they put their own stamp on it. Usually, they can't help themselves. They have to, don't they? They always find something. You look around, there it is. There's the symbol. That's a Masonic symbol. It's like, yes, you have to sort of put their own signature on these. But yeah, there's definitely something to it.
Mhm.
Because they were involved in ritualistic practices and all sorts of things. The Freemasons, the Masons, goes back a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you read some of the work by Ralph Ellis,
Yeah,
it's fascinating. And basically, he's to sum it up quickly, he is saying that the Freemasons go all the way back to the Knights Templar, all the way back to the time of Jesus, whoever he was, if he did exist, and essentially back to ancient Egypt, and there are the same rituals that we're practicing
cosmology,
today. They're
Egyptian
practicing
cosmology.
back then.
Yeah,
So with the fact that it's a Masonic building and it's on the 37th parallel, which is known right the way
yeah,
across America, it
yeah.
makes you think that they've built that there on purpose, and
Purpose.
to harness the energy of the land almost. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Rachel, about ancient rituals? Do you think they still play a part in the paranormal world?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we see it all a lot um, in these places. And, like for example, when I was talking about Brushy Mountain, the prison, there wasn't just the prison that was built there, right? It had natives on the land long before the prison was there. And so we know with the Native Americans being highly, ritualistic
Mm.
in their beliefs. Like I think that definitely has something to do too when we look at these locations and say, is it like, in part like it's this mixed bag, right? Is it this perfect storm of the land itself having some type of energy and power, and the Native Americans sort of recognizing that, using that place of power to do rituals so that it then harnesses this energy and allows for communication with different entities or energies, if you want to call it
Mm.
either way. I think it's highly suggestive that
Yeah.
there's some sort of connection.
Do you ever
Yeah.
bring your homework? You ever bring your work home with you, Rachel, by chance? Just out of curiosity.
I have not.
Okay.
I have not.
But they don't follow you back home then.
Okay.
No?
Huh?
They don't follow you back home.
I haven't had that
Okay,
experience.
that's good.
We did have like one of the members of our team when we were in a location called Trousdale Place, another historic home we were investigating in, and we were doing this um, technique called a human pendulum. Don't know
Oh
if
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
you So, we both, myself and our
Mm.
and my teammate Sam, this was her first time participating in a human pendulum. She was very excited to try it, but she, like I, were, you know, very connected and open. Um, and it's sort of the reason why I won't do a lot of Estes method, because I think being that conduit for those energies to manifest, you have to know how to sort of put that block and protect yourself. And if you're not
Yeah,
doing that, then these energies can
yeah.
definitely
That's
like
that's
attach to you.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Do
And I
you
think with
do you
with
use
her,
things to ward things off as well? Do you ward?
yeah,
Okay. What sort of things do you use? Do you iron, hematite, or anything? What do you use?
I will use like I'm wearing right now,
Okay. So what
obsidian.
obsidian? Okay.
Obsidian. I've got a gold Hamsa hand
Okay.
on it. I will often have other crystals on me. We'll always do what we
Hmm.
kind of do before opening ourselves up to do any investigation. We always do kind of these, I wouldn't call it a prayer, but it's kind of like an
Yeah.
opening,
Yeah.
like but protection. And then we'll do some oils, essential oils to put on ourselves to try and keep protect our energies.
It's funny when you talk about oils because we utilize oils, but the phenomena can manifest oils as well. And when I was in Seattle, it was pouring out of the walls, frankincense of all things, just seeping it out. It was pouring out, coming down the walls, and we took analysis. It's frankincense. So what they're flipping out? It's frankincense coming out the wall, literally seeping out the walls, of this location where there were paranormal phenomena. But you know what? If the phenomena utilizes that, it's symbolistic. It has some bearing to it. Just like crystals, I suppose.
Again, the oils go back to the ancient Egyptian rituals and things of that nature. So it goes back for as long as time itself. I mean, I think it is a good time, actually, Rachel, to bring up witchcraft. And I'm certainly not calling you a witch or anything of that nature, but you're talking there about, using like rituals for protection and using certain substances and crystals. So back in the day, these are ladies that were essentially hunted down and executed for being witches. They were really just their day's equivalent of psychics, of clairvoyants, people have prognostic abilities. So, what are your thoughts on that? Were these people just practicing what we celebrate today? Essentially, if someone's got an ability, everyone wants to know. Where in that time, it was shut down. I mean, there are movements in Britain, for example, to have these ladies exonerated. After the death, and I can't understand why that hasn't moved forward faster. So, what are your thoughts on that? Because witchcraft, it kind of gets shoved into fantasy, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those women should be,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely more honored, for their contribution. I think in that day and time, they might have been as simple as the healthcare practitioners of that time, because a lot of them were midwives. A lot of them were herbalists. They really knew how they would help people who were suffering, sometimes just to get out of pain, just because they had some sort of disease, and the only thing that they knew how to do was use herbs. It was the medicine of that time, and so a lot of these people were like medicine women, and they may have had the gift of clairvoyance or some sort of being able to connect to energies, and unfortunately, at the time of religious persecution of these people, because they didn't understand and they were scared, and they like to say, oh, that's the devil working through them, and it probably was further from the truth.
And this is probably Catholicism, which, yeah, the devil's worked through that, all right. Over years. It's so talk about hypocritical, but there's nobody who's been more persecuted really than the witchcraft trials was just terrible, and even prior to that, we're going back in time. But you know what? There were a few cases where, yeah, there was sigilization, there was paranormal phenomena, and the rooms filling with sulfur smell so bad that they struggled to breathe. They had to put their hands over the face, and this was drawing on some of those witch trials. Yes, there was some phenomena, people associated to maybe some darker sides, and the invocation of stuff. But the problem is everybody got tarnished. It's like, let's just wipe the slate clean of even if you're just going out and picking flowers, which might be able to heal you. Doesn't matter, or everything came under that. And we talk about Salem being one of the most significant places in the US, but I mean, when I compare that to sort of places like Scotland, I mean, Scotland was terrible, and throughout all of maybe Europe really was, and the total unfair, even the persecution and killing of people weren't even witches, weren't even healers. They were just normal people. But if you looked a bit dodgy, or if you had some deficiency, a limp even, or one eye slightly different color than the other, which is a normal thing that people can have. Anything, yep, that's the devil's work. And it was basically a purge. That's what it was, and that's a terrible thing. But you know what's happening in modern day now? They're utilizing things right from Wicca and those days from the witchcraft into modern science. And you think to yourself, what the hell? And you start to look at the medications that we're taking in pill form. You start to think, hang on a second, this is plant, this is plant, this is plant. Painkillers are all plants, aren't they? So, and you think to yourself, we're doing exactly the same thing now. So yes, they were right. He just got persecuted, you know, and he was just a Persian. It was a terrible thing, but some of them did survive and carry on. But they had to go underground, and I say underground, super secret, to be honest with you. And I don't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts, Rachel, on some of the legends of witches? And I know we're drifting a little bit into fantasy here, so I'm not trying to guide you or lead you, but are we talking there, or maybe witches like Steve was alluding to? Where you've got a good and a bad side to everything, or are we, sort of spirit thereof, or are we talking of like a trickster element, something that's not understood and has been perceived as a witch, or taken even the image or whatever of a witch? What are your thoughts on that? Because I believe is it the Bell Witch, which is relatively close to you, I think, in Tennessee.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I think the Bell Witch is a good example of some of that. I mean, the whole story is definitely interesting, but parts of it are definitely sad because
yeah,
I think that John Bell, who is the one who kind of went after Kate Batts, who she was known as the Bell Witch. Um, they really wanted her land,
yeah,
and unfortunately, she was a strong woman who was going to say like, "No way in hell, you're not getting my
Yeah,
land."
yeah,
you know and I think that she put up a fight, and I think that's where in part the legend comes out. um and they want to say, because I think John Bell's daughter was the first one to be affected
mm,
by the supposed witch. She saw her come in her dreams, um again at night
yeah,
in her dream.
yeah,
yeah,
And then, of course, told her dad, and then they kind of were like, "Oh my God, it's that woman," and really, was that the case, or again, was the story perpetuated just so they could go
mm,
after this woman, take her land? She hid out in a cave, and
mm,
you know that's kind of where the story kind of starts. But so I know the team that runs the Bell Witch Cave pretty well. We've talked a couple times about it, and I mean, there's phenomena that exists. Again, it's on the land, and a lot of that they believe is Native American.
mm.
So some of that haunting, um, may not be what they think it is attributed to the Bell Witch.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it just could be a legend. But there is definitely something happening on that land. What that is, I think it lends more to natives being on that land and using that land for ritualistic purposes.
I
So
mean, Steve, it's a good example again of legends being twisted to suit a
always
certain
does.
narrative or a certain agenda.
Yeah, anybody who's done the work in research, you start to take the story, the narrative, and then you start to dig deep. And in a deep dive into the research, you realize, little icing on the cake here has been added to glorify it, entertainment maybe, or whatever. Rumors, Chinese whispers, all sorts of different things get added in. And you know what? It just happens. It's the embellishment of how humans do this. It's just from storytelling, really. It just happens. And but when you do the research, you have to sort of separate, the original story and cut off point as to what else has been added since then. And that's the same. No, it's not just the same for the Bell. It's the same for many. Be honest with you. I mean, there's so many that I've looked into, and basically the half the amount of what phenomena was there. Really, it's been embellished, and that does happen a lot because everybody likes a great ghost story, don't they? At the end of the day.
Yeah,
yeah, and they did make the Bell Witch story into a movie. I think it
They
was called
did.
The American
Yeah,
Haunting.
that's right.
Uh,
Sutherland. Yeah, Donald Sutherland was in it, wasn't it? I remember it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's
So
the
again,
worst, isn't it? When
that
they make them into
story.
movies, it's just like, what the hell is this? Especially when you know the story and then you see some movie made about it and you think, what the hell is that? It's nothing to do with the story. It's just entertainment. But you know what? People get a bit mixed up because there's still people out there that think, well, if I've seen it in the movie, then that's distrust or distruths and stuff. Well, no, it's entertainment. They do it on purpose. They had this with the recent Conjuring film. You know,
Yeah, I was just thinking that
yeah,
same thing,
yeah,
because I got to see not this weekend, but the weekend last weekend,
yeah,
was
That was
able
when
to
I
see.
saw it as well.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw the actual Annabelle. Had an opportunity to be in the same presence because they were doing, they call it the Devil on the Run tour,
Yeah.
in America. So, yeah, I got to be in front of the real Annabelle, and yeah, she's a Raggedy Ann doll, and she's in this case, and there's all this,
Yeah.
symbolism on
Yeah.
it to say like, don't touch it, dangerous, whatever. I honestly didn't feel much off of her at all.
No, I
Um,
know. I know people that say, "Oh, I'd give it a cuddle," you know, because I think a lot of it lies here, your intent. Because anything can become that, if you believe it strongly enough. I do believe that. It doesn't have to be a cursed item, and it doesn't have to be a possessed item through demonic stuff, But I think any item. I mean, what's an apport? I mean, if paranormal phenomena could suddenly manifest an apport in front of you, is that one? I mean, it's had paranormal's had its hands on it, so. So you'd have to sort of question. I do question a lot of those things, but it's not like I want to bring them into my house though to test them.
No, absolutely not.
exactly.
That
I don't
leads
know
me.
if
Oh,
I'd
God.
want to do that either, just because, your
No,
home is your safe
exactly.
space.
It's your sanctuary, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That
But
leads
it'd
me
be
nice.
interesting to
Yeah,
have a space where you could actually study that and see if
yeah, yeah.
there is some truth to it.
Yeah, I'd
But
love to.
I would want it to be kind of a neutral space. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah. That leads me
so
nicely into my next point, actually, Rachel, because you were speaking about protection and you were talking about there about, not bringing stuff into your house. I don't know if you've had any encounters personally of the jinn and whether you feel that they're a separate entity or whether they are part of this trickster element of the paranormal. But you were mentioning about having a belief, having something to protect yourself, whether it's a god, whether it's whatever it is. We spoke with a researcher, UK researcher called Debbie Cartwright, and she ended up experiencing a jinn in Turkey, but she went into a cave where the guy whose land it was on, he was saying, "There's jinn here. You need to protect yourself. Do you believe in a god?" And they kind of, made out that they did, and said it's really important that you believe in. So, where do you think that? Because it's interesting that you're speaking about that, and then we've got someone on the other side of the world speaking about that with a seemingly different entity. So, how important do you think belief and the power of belief actually is in this?
I think it's a huge. Um, I think it's very huge in the way that, like, I guess what they would say, having faith in something,
Yes.
right? I think can go a long way. I think that in part is sort of the manifestation of what you really hold true, like whatever that symbol is for you. Like we talk a lot about like having a belief maybe in a deity like Hecate,
yeah,
um, or Buddha, or
yeah,
Jesus, whatever it is. That's when we always say, like, whatever your belief system is what and symbol that you choose, and if you believe in it, that will help like protect you. So I think that makes sense. As far as like, I haven't encountered anything like a jinn, but I do know about it. Essentially, that's kind of like where genie came from, right? Was a jinn. But I think that's just another word they used to explain maybe an entity or something that they didn't know what to call, like an apparition or a ghost or some sort of energy. I think that's just their word in the Middle East for it.
yeah,
Yeah, I think you're right
yeah.
there. I
Yeah,
mean,
not all apparitions are bad. I mean, what if you see a nice little apparition of a furry pussycat? Because people see animal apparitions, and you don't look at that and you think, "Oh, God, I've got to protect myself." You wouldn't really do that. Can't imagine that. But what in ancient times, what they were doing if they came across something like that is that they prayed to the larger deity to get rid of the old deity. So there was, big G, God, and the little G's. Lots of little G's all over the world, all wanting a piece of the pie. But sometimes they ended up having to go to worship something else, which is probably bigger, stronger, whatever, to sort of deal with a problem from a little G. And that's kind of how they were doing it in ancient times. But apparitions come from all shapes and sizes. But what I do find really interesting is those other aspects of the paranormal, which you sometimes come across. Time slips. strange coincidences. What the hell is all that about, and why should it be affecting us? Because you think paranormal phenomena is an external phenomenon, you're going into its environment to it, but then you experience these things. People experience these things in their life, especially if you've been involved in paranormal investigation for many years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Rachel? Because as I say, you've investigated a lot of places. I mean, have you experienced anything like time slips or missing time or anything like that?
I haven't myself experienced like a time slip, but I know that a couple of members of our team have before where they've been, like, for example, been in a car and it's sort of like they were here 1 minute, the next minute they're somewhere else and they don't know like even how they got there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's one of them. I think the only thing that I can say that I can liken to is just again feeling like if I'm picking up energies in a certain location, sometimes it feels like it's in a different time period.
Hmm.
I can give you an example. We did an investigation at Harriman Hospital, which is in Harriman, Tennessee. It was a functioning hospital all the way up until I think into like the late maybe 1980s before it shut down. So there's still there. In fact, that there was a lady who was there that night that is a volunteer who stays on the property to help the investigators if we need any questions. So she kind of works for the building owner, and she was herself a patient in that hospital at one point in time because the hospital, of course, birth babies there were surgeries there. It was just a functioning hospital like any other hospital. So we were upstairs investigating in this one area that I guess used to be what they called like the continuation care. So if they got out of surgery, or they're in the hospital and they were in intensive care, this was kind of the next level down, like a continuation care unit. And we were there with a couple of other investigators. And one of them was doing an Estes method, and they were lying in this. There was only one hospital bed in the room, and she was lying on it, and she was, was in sort of sensory deprivation, right? She had like a blindfold on and the headphones on, and it was doing the white noise. And if anything comes through, any voices, she would repeat what she hears. And so myself and another investigator who she's, very, very sensitive. She channels and that kind of thing. And she's also like Reiki trained. And we were talking about it and we were both feeling the same thing. We were both feeling like we were in this space where we didn't feel like we should be, that there were doctors and nurses working all around us. And she's like, we were talking about that because she was like, yeah, I feel like I'm picking up on a doctor that's here that is kind of gruff, that we're in this space because he's just trying to work and we're in the way. And I said, yeah, I feel very much like that. Like I feel doctors and nurses are all around and I feel like I'm uncomfortable in this space that I'm in their way. And so we were talking about that. And then the next thing you know, and I have that, I think on Instagram, on our Instagram page, but I was recording our friend that was doing the Estes method at that time. And you can hear myself and my co-investigator talking about feeling like we're in their way. And then all of a sudden we caught on that video and we heard it audibly with our ears, probably the loudest, clearest EVP or disembodied voice, I should say, that we ever heard, where it said, "I see you." And it was just like, it sounded like it was right in my ear, scared the crap out of the lady. And she grabbed my hand and leaped because she thought it was coming from her friend there that was doing the Estes method. And we ended up land on top of her. And she screamed because she didn't know what the heck was happening because she couldn't see or hear anything. But what was interesting at the time that happened with the disembodied voice, all of our equipment was going off. Right. At the same time, we had like the paranormal tripwire lighting up crazy, REM pod, beeping. And everybody, myself, Alicia, who was with me, and then another girl as well, all said we heard like it sounded like it said it right in our ears. But even though Alicia and I were next to each other, our friend Sheila was all the way over sitting on the nurse's station. And she said the voice sounded like it was in her ear too. But when we caught it, I got it on that like on Instagram, the video, you can clearly hear it saying, I see you. And we were thinking initially, like it's saying it can see us. And then afterwards, when we were downstairs and talking about it and playing it for other investigators that were there on the opposite end of the hospital, they were nowhere around us. And so, because we walkie-talkied them, we're like, where are you? And, and they're like, we're clear on the other end in radiology, which was the opposite end of this humongous hospital. And so we're like, meet us in the lobby. We've got something to show you. And so when we were just talking about it and trying to like see if we could come up with an explanation for it, and we were showing it to the lady that was there from the building, she was like, oh, I get that all the time. She said, I often walk through the rooms here and I pretend and I tell the spirits, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm just here to clean the hospital today. Let me know if I'm in your way in any way, shape, or form. But what got me thinking was maybe it wasn't saying I can physically see you. I think it was saying I see you like intensive care unit, because we're feeling like we're in its way. And I think it was saying, this is the ICU. Get out of here, You're in our way. And so everybody after that was like, oh, that makes like perfect sense. And so, but that's where I think like that time slip sort of feeling was like, whoa, we just slipped back into their working environment.
Yes, a good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
I see you. Yeah, it makes sense.
It really does. It really does. I mean, like we speak a lot, Steve, about science wanting to test this sort of stuff out, and you can't do this kind of stuff in a lab, And so what you need to do is take the laboratory to these locations. So I mean, Rachel, what are your thoughts now? How important do you think science, mainstream science, for want of a better phrase, will prove to be? And does it need to meet us, paranormal researchers and investigators, halfway? Because it'd be interesting, for example, when you're getting these feelings of something bad happening or something here, it'd be interesting to see what, for example, your brain activity is doing and what's going on there and whether we can find answers out there. And, I suppose science has to accept, like Steve speaks about a lot, that, the phenomena, the intelligence won't just do something on command. It'll do things when it wants to. So how do you think we move forward, basically, in investigating paranormal research? Do we need to be looking at all kinds of different things? And do we need to get mainstream science on board with us to help prove this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there has to be some science to this, but I think that science needs to open its mind a little bit more.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah,
it really does.
And definitely, I think it would be great to meet us in these locations and just be there to observe. I mean, that's essentially what we are. We're observers of this phenomena. But I think that if there's some way that we can start to be able to measure it more and get some data that sort of backs up the experience that we're having in that moment, I think that would go a long way to really connecting the dots and maybe propel us a little bit further in both fields. Because I think, honestly, we're all trying to get to the same thing. We're trying to get answers to these, humongous overarching questions like, is there life after death? What is consciousness? Like, so, come to the table. Let's I think it takes a bit of even religion coming to the table. Let's have paranormal religion and science, come to the table and see if we can get together to figure this out.
Absolutely. Steve, you must have some thoughts on that, because I agree with the fact that we should all be coming together. I mean,
it is difficult. I mean, I run a parapsychological establishment myself, but we do recognize the bridge between out there and paranormal phenomena and what we do in the lab, because we can't take it into the lab. It doesn't want to come with us. It doesn't perform when it wants to. We have to go to the environment to experience it. So really what we need to do is have a mobile lab to
Yeah,
be able to
absolutely.
go to location and work with paranormal investigators. And I have talked about this till I've gone blue in my face with other parapsychology departments around the UK. But do you know what? They will not play ball. And I've argued upon, look, we need to move on. We've got to, because we are stuck in a rut. I mean, we're not advancing this subject since the 1600s, still doing the same things. We've got to get forward somehow. I don't think they want to, or they did. It's just the way that these parapsychologists are now is that they just don't want to put the neck on the line. They're very la-di-da and about, well, I don't want to talk about stuff like that. Well, that's fundamentally your job as a parapsychologist to do so. But no, they'll go and research some telepathy tests which have been carried out for the last 30 years or dreamed interpretations. But you don't need to, because those are the hard things to look for. Paranormal phenomena is right on your nose, right on the doorstep, right under your nose, and yet they still don't. I mean, Kostler Parapsychology in Edinburgh is surrounded with paranormal locations. Can't It's literally next door, and yet they're going, oh well, we can't find paranormal. So I feel like dragging them in and throwing them in next door for a few hours. Okay, let's go and see how we go on. But no, it is frustrating times. I completely get it. But you know what? We do need paranormal investigators out there, because I tell you what, parapsychologists don't really want to come to the table on that. I mean, I have, but not many people. Even I got shunned. Oh, well, you into ghost hunting, are you, Steve? Yeah, they look down on stuff like that, but they shouldn't do, because there's some incredible stuff. If it's not for paranormal investigators, and we do need diversity out there to be sure, we wouldn't know half the stuff that's going on, because they're quick to quote people. Oh yes, this took place and that took place. Well, hang on a second, but then you're not interested in it, and yet you're quite happy to quote these people that have done paranormal investigations. So hypocrites, absolutely. I'm sorry to say, and it's a bit strong pointed, but I do get a bit annoyed about that, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's definitely progress to be made. I mean, Rachel, we're going to have to let you go soon. We're coming up to that 90-minute mark. But one last thing, I suppose, a good way to end this is how do you see paranormal research unfolding as we go forward from here? We mentioned how things are most likely connected. Do you think we need to see Bigfoot researchers, UFO researchers, ghost hunters, whatever you want to call these different groups, coming together and just researching the phenomenon instead of researching? And it's great to have experts in certain fields, but you need to kind of like see the whole picture. So I guess you're nodding, you do agree with that. How do you feel we should go moving forward then, Rachel, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that front. I think that it does take, I think, a blend of, cryptid and UFO and ghost hunters to really, I think propel something forward, because and we learned something every time we collaborate with another team, right? We learn a different technique,
Yep.
A different way of
Diversity. That's what
investigating.
I'm saying. Diversity.
And
Yeah.
so I think even connecting with like an organization like MUFON and how they go out and try to figure out what's going on with the UFO phenomenon
Yeah.
in a location, a sighting that happens, a close encounter,
Yeah.
and the same thing that with Bigfoot researchers and when they're out in the field. And I think that we could really learn a lot from one another to move this ahead and try to integrate and get some solid data going, because I mean there's definitely some changes in the environment that have to be happening, whether that's EMF or temperature, humidity, pressure in the environment. If we can document that at the same time we're experiencing phenomena,
Yeah.
again, and either get that on video, get that on audio, and able to really document it down, then we can say like, well, truly something was going on here and it deserves further research.
Yeah,
Totally
definitely,
agree.
Steve. I mean, I know you agree this
Totally
is the
agree.
way forward. So, I mean, do you think we'll get there? Do you think
Well,
we're
it's
moving in the right
difficult,
direction?
There's still that compartmentalization. I keep trying to bash it down with a big hammer. You know, paranormal guys don't deal with UFO guys. UFO guys don't deal with that. And cryptid guys, Bigfoot guys, they're on their own as well. But you know, if you really start really digging into it, you'll say to, oh, right, well, the Bigfoot, yeah, well, do you know what? Sometimes there's strange lights and things seen around them, and they act as if they have some paranormal abilities or whatever. And you think, okay, so that's paranormal. So, but they don't get into it. And it's the same for UFOs. You know, I mean, it's always been the same with UFOs associated with people have UFO experiences and have poltergeist stuff for a week afterwards, and you think, what the hell? You know, so they know, and MUFON knows, but MUFON won't take that step. I've had my words with MUFON over this, you know, but they just don't want to get into it. They want to clearly define UFO and nothing else, and there is no clear define. That's the problem. These are all merged together, you know, in some weird and crazy way. But let's not, you know, disillusion ourselves, you know, because we shouldn't compartmentalize. Just say, well, just because it's in the paranormal and I'm a ufologist, I shouldn't get into it. You do need, because your answer might be in that camp, might not be in this camp. You know, so you have to collapse all the boxes, look at it as a whole. And if people are seeing cryptids or paranormal or UFOs or whatever, I'm always happy to hear, because it's all seemingly connected in some fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a part of this organization that's called the Cryptid Women's Society. And it's not just cryptids that we focus on. There are those who are in that cryptid field, but we're all coming together, whether we're ghost or UFO or
Brilliant.
cryptid. And we're coming to the table talking to each other and seeing what we can do. And we're talking about trying to do investigations. Like, I would love to go and learn what MUFON and how an investigator investigates a sighting once that happens, or I would love to go on a Bigfoot hunt and see what they do. Because I think that can help us. I think it can only help us. I don't think it would hinder us in any way, shape, or form. So
I think it's a great idea. I agree. Great. We need more like that, more organizations doing the same thing, to be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, Rachel, it's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. It really, really has. So, I mean, you know, what you got coming up, Rachel? What you're working on? What lectures you got coming up? The floor's yours for 30 seconds or so, my friend.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been wonderful talking to you guys. So I mean, most of the stuff we have for the rest of this month before when we get into winter, everything slows down a bit for us because it makes it hard to investigate when it's so cold. But so we're doing quite a few events for the spooky season, kind of to end that. We're doing them at the historic Rosemont in Gallatin, Tennessee. So we've got upcoming the week of Halloween. They're having an event that's called the Echoes of the Past, where there is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you get to go each night with a different team at a historical site. And so you can investigate 4 nights in a row. Our team will be at Rosemont on October 30th, and we'll be leading that investigation at Rosemont. And then the very next day, we're going to be there for Ghost Lore and S'mores. And so we've got some great speakers coming for that and to tell their stories and around a campfire and, have some families involved. And
brilliant.
So it's, it's kind of the end of the spooky season. And then of course we'll be working over the winter to decide what 2026 is going to be for us and where we're going to investigate. So I would say, if people are interested, they can go on to our Instagram, Facebook, or even website, even TikTok now at SinisterSistersParanormal.com.
Excellent. Well, we urge all our viewers to check that out. And once we get to 2026, Rachel, maybe you could come back on the show and tell us what you've been up to and what you've discovered.
Yeah, that would be good.
To speak with you again.
I would love that so much.
Excellent stuff, Bob. But thank you for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you again for having me.
No problem at all. It's the pleasure's all ours. And thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you leave your comments and thoughts. So make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments, should I say. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further news, articles, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.